Hello and welcome to the ASB Investment Podcast, the show that keeps you up to date on the markets and helps you make smart choices with your investments. These are entirely our own views and that of our guests. It's not investment advice, but we know plenty of experts at ASB that will be happy to chat if you need. Well, hi everyone and welcome to another episode of the ASB Investment Podcast. We have another great edition lined up for you today. It should be one that's a little bit further down the rabbit hole of investing than our previous 101 episodes maybe. So it could be like selecting the dish on a menu that has the 3 chili signs next to it. So if you're not used to that much chili, I'd encourage you to stick with it. It will further help to develop your investing tolerance. So on the show today, we have Dr. Justin Case, a finance lecturer at the University of Auckland. Continuing the academic flavour we've had recently, his research focuses on empirical asset pricing and machine learning. And he's recently co-authored a new study by University of Auckland and the Queensland University of Technology, along with Professor Adam Clements, which showed that utilising business news articles, specifically those published in the hallowed Wall Street Journal, it's one of my fave go-tos, how they can accurately or more accurately forecast stock market volatility than other commonly used methods. So we're excited to dive into this research, find out about him, and also kind of, can reading business news make you a little bit richer? So Justin, welcome to the show, and how are you?
Yeah, good. Thanks. Thank you very much for having me, and thanks for your interest in our research.
As I said before when we were warming up, a bit of a pig in mud on this. So for our listeners, can you give us a brief update or intro into your background, how you've started, how you've got to coming to the University of Auckland, and also then after that, kind of what's your area of expertise?
Yeah, so as you kindly introduced me, I'm a lecturer in finance at the University of Auckland. My research really does focus on that machine learning applications in asset pricing. I come from quite a quantitative background, so I've got postgraduate degrees in mathematics and engineering.
Okay. Wow.
I spent a long time a good few years in industry doing research and development on the engineering side in vibroacoustics. So that all comes through into my research into this sort of more quantitative area that we're going to unpick today.
So basically you're a genius, and just to explain, vibroacoustics, is that like the things we've got in the studio here, like that help with sound, or is it something much more complex?
No. This is it. So I'm thinking after our podcast, we're going to hit up band practice and get the recording.
Okay. And so like we were talking before, what made you go from R&D in industry to the academic path?
Yeah, I suppose just exploring something new. I really wanted to get into this machine learning area that was starting to pick up just prior to 2020 when I started doing my PhD. And as we all see now, it's really exploding. Yeah. So it's a good space to be in.
And so machine learning is also known, or can it also be known as AI?
Yes, we can do a whole podcast on the classification of these algorithms. But essentially, in terms of an academic perspective, we're thinking of artificial intelligence as the broadest scope.
Sure,
right?
Yeah.
What we often talk about in the news and all of that when we talk about artificial intelligence is really these deep learning algorithms, these deep neural networks.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Probably a bit more of a different topic to what we're going to be discussing today. But generally machine learning covers all of that. Artificial intelligence is even broader than this machine learning aspect.
And so to get into it, like business uses a forecasting tool, obviously I hope it's coming through to listeners. I'm nerding out here, but first of all, what led you to explore business news as kind of like a forecasting tool?
Yeah, so I think there are really 3 key points that I'm going to try and explain in that respect. The first also comes to this definition of business news. What is business news? It's just a verbal representation of economic events that are happening. Good example, what's driving financial markets or global financial markets at the moment? Big topic, Donald Trump and his tariffs. Yeah. So we see that that's driving markets. What do we see in our business news? Donald Trump and his tariffs, right? Yeah. So we've got this natural alignment between what we're seeing in the business news and what we think of as driving our financial markets. So we've got a natural synergy there. Second point that I'd like to bring up is news has this forward-looking aspect to it. It's got opinions, it's got speculation. If I'm reading, for example, the Wall Street Journal or the New Zealand Herald, I don't just want to know what's happened in the past hour, the past 24 hours. I want some sort of expert opinion or some forward looking of what this means for me going forward.
Implications.
Yeah. So business news has this natural forward-looking aspect that ties into all our portfolio and investments and asset pricing, which is this forward-looking exercise. So we're talking about forecasting stock market volatility. Again, it ties into that respect. Third point in relation to why business news is it's done at such a high frequency, right? Wall Street Journal publishing news every second, every minute, every hour, every day. So it's just a data volume issue at that point, which ties in with volatility forecasting, which is often done at a high frequency.
Yeah.
So I think it's all of those things which tie together. If I maybe contrast it a little bit, if we didn't look at business news, we might be looking at something like our traditional macroeconomic variables. Macroeconomic variables, historical snapshot at some point in time. Backward looking. So it doesn't have this forward-looking aspect that we think of when we think of business news. Also published at a very low frequency, maybe monthly, maybe quarterly, often on an annual basis sort of thing. So it just doesn't have that data volume or that frequency that we're looking at.
And just like, I guess at the time of recording, as an example would be like on last Friday, we had the the big jobs report that came out. And so that's all backward looking plus revisions. Is that an example of, and then the commentary about it? That would be a live example of what you're talking about, like the efficacy of news about it versus just the snapshot looking back.
Yeah, I think that's one example, but also that jobs report, how often do they release them? If we're looking at forming volatility forecasts every day, we don't get a jobs report
every day. Okay, sure.
So all of these things sort of tie in together to lend business news and these narratives within the business news to forecasting our market movements.
So you mentioned like volatility forecasting. I guess, why is that important to investors?
Yeah, so that's a nice simple question to answer. Volatility is our proxy for risk. So if we're able to forecast that risk, we're able to take steps to mitigate it. So if I'm thinking on a very simple basis, I've got a portfolio of two assets, one being my risky asset and one being my risk-free asset. If I'm forecasting more risk in the future for this risky asset, I can decrease my holdings of that risky asset going forward and therefore reduce my exposure to that risk.
Or conversely, take on more risk?
Yeah. Okay. Goes both ways in that sense.
And so we talked about the Wall Street Journal, sort of the main data source. It's in the team putting together, what we're going to talk about. They flagged that, you looked at 1.1 million Wall Street Journal articles over almost 22 years. So I thought I consumed a lot of news. But so can you walk us through, that methodology and why kind of, you focused on the journal and anything else, as kind of key things that underpin that?
Starting off with maybe why the Wall Street Journal and how we've done the academic exercise. Wall Street Journal being biggest business newspaper in the world. Yeah. And we're looking at stock market volatility, specifically of the S&P 500 being the most watched equities index in the world. So there is that alignment just from more of an academic perspective than anything else. In terms of analyzing these 1.1 million full-text news articles, what we do is it's a machine learning algorithm called a latent Dirichlet allocation topic model.
Wow, okay.
A little bit to unpack there, but I'll try and explain it very intuitively. So essentially what we're trying to do is go from this huge dimension, natural language news corpus into a very small set of dimensions that we can actually analyze. If I open a newspaper and I flip through to the financial markets section, I'm going to see a very specific set of vocabulary. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to see things like stock, index, price, market, etc., etc. That's going to be very different from what I see if I flip to the sports section, if I flip to the political section, etc. What this LDA topic model does is essentially it finds this underlying structure in the news. So it finds what topics all these news articles are talking about and allocates that topic distribution over these 1.1 million news articles. From there, it's a relatively simple step. What's nice about news is it's got this timestamp that we've already spoken about. So what we're able to do is we're essentially able to track news attention. So we're able to see what the news is talking about, what topic the news is talking about at a specific point in time.
Yeah.
And that's what we then use. We use both the news topics, the broad news topics, and the certain term frequencies underpinning these topics to be able to look at what's driving financial markets, what's driving volatility.
And so for you, I guess, I can imagine one technical hurdle for these sorts of things is you need a massive data set. Is there, and I guess, financial news, it's almost like there's an industry around financial markets, and that's the financial news and media industry, and its job is to pump out more to get you to consume. So it's really picking, I guess. But were there any other technical hurdles that you needed to overcome?
No, I think you've nailed it, really. It's the volume hurdle. There's so much news, and again, it comes down to this dimension reduction task. So it's just the amount of computing time. If I'm doing this analysis, say if I do it on a standard PC so that everyone's got an idea, it's going to take me weeks, potentially months to go from 1.1 million text news articles into what we end up analyzing. So that's the biggest hurdle, is really getting it into that format.
And just as a side question, do you have enough compute?
Yes, luckily we do. Again, this as we go forward, we're always improving on our compute power.
Right, yeah.
So it does get quicker and quicker year on year. But yeah, we're lucky in that we do have enough compute to do this.
But I guess you're a live example of, if we don't have enough computing power, it slows down your research. And the more you get, the faster you can look at stuff.
Yeah.
In theory.
Yeah.
And talking about kind of errors you've seen there, you mentioned a reduction in kind of forecast errors. What does that mean?
Yeah, so we're forecasting stock market volatility.
Yeah.
We're comparing it to a benchmark volatility forecasting model.
Yeah.
So
like the VIX?
No.
Okay.
So VIX is just our volatility index from options implied prices.
Sure.
We're looking at we're using something called a HAR model, which is a heterogeneous autoregressive model. So
My God.
benchmark in volatility forecasting,
sure.
right? We're taking our signals that we extract from the news text, and we're adding that into this HAR model. And then we're comparing forecast errors between these two things. Once we take all the signal from the news text, put it into this benchmark volatility model, we're then seeing this 40% reduction in forecasting errors. And that's at the monthly forecasting horizon.
Okay, and so are you able to see the future now? and said another way, like is 40% a significant improvement?
Yes. Yeah. So maybe if I put it into perspective again, what we see is we've got volatility clustering. So we see volatility in our financial markets at specific points in time.
Yes.
Yep. So our volatility forecasting error reduction essentially happens in the last 25 or 20 years that we're looking at in two specific periods where we're rarely able to outperform this benchmark model. Number one is during the GFC, and number two is during our COVID-19 pandemic.
Right. And so sorry, you said those are the two periods where the model has improved things, or it's very hard to?
No, that's where the news has this most forecasting power. So that's where we see all our increase, not all of our increase, but the main increase in our volatility prediction accuracy happens in these two periods.
Right.
In terms of significance, what that means is that if you were using news to forecast volatility at those two periods, you would have been able to time the market during the two biggest economic shocks
risk off periods, like, where massive drawdowns of the last 22 years.
Yeah. So in terms of significance, it has the significance from that aspect.
Yeah. So I'm just trying to think on the fly, because the model's running, it's seeing all these headlines and financial, it's almost ahead of the market pricing it.
Yeah, it's ahead of the market in being able to forecast where this volatility is going. And you've mentioned the VIX index. We do throw the VIX index into this HAR model.
Yeah.
And again, it just doesn't do nearly as well as the signals coming from the news text.
So you're separating signal from noise.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh, amazing. So there's just simply so much news out there written by lots of different people, and we, like, some of it's credible, some of it's not. Were there any categories of news that influenced, things the most, or, those keywords or themes that you saw?
Yeah. So it really, it does come to a very intuitive level when we talk about these news topics and these news terms that are influencing stock market volatility. Maybe the most intuitive one is that when we see the Wall Street Journal focusing on financial markets and stock market activity, that's when we see the most volatility in this area. There's obviously more news to write about at that point in time. Maybe coming back to those two big economic shocks, during the GFC, we see a lot of news around banking and financial institutions.
Yes.
Lots of news around loans and mortgages, etc.
Yeah.
During COVID-19, we see our public health news topic explode, and again, lots of the keyword there being COVID-19.
Yeah.
Across all of those periods, though, we see personal finance and credit being something, and credit being the key word within that topic that's driving a lot of the volatility as well. Maybe on the other side, and something that was also very interesting, is we saw that some of these news topics also relate to lower periods.
Okay, so relative calm.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. The two that maybe come to mind first are M&A, mergers and acquisitions, corporate mergers and acquisitions news. When there's a focus on that, we see lower periods of stock market volatility. And another interesting one was sports news. If there's a big focus on sports in the Wall Street Journal, we also see lower stock market volatility at that point.
So I guess I always think of, like, if I'm closer to home, if I hear about markets in any way on drive time news, on the radio or the 6 o'clock news, that's when I feel, okay, that's when it's in the lexicon, it's at the zeitgeist of everyone's conscious. So it's kind of like saying, if what you're saying is, if that's on the front page of the journal, that's a big thing. But you're saying for the M&A and sports part, particularly the M&A bit, is that because businesses are only doing or mostly doing M&A when the water's nice and clear?
Yeah, I think you've nailed it on that one. There is a good amount of academic literature in that area that says these mergers and acquisitions happen when we've got strong economic conditions. It makes sense. There's less risk in that period, and we've therefore got lower stock market volatility.
Okay, and so the team, when they were setting this up, they talked about. You've compared your approach to ChatGPT. Everyone says that's what if someone says what's AI or machine learning, they talk about probably ChatGPT. What did that show?
Yeah, so we take an approach used in another academic article where they throw these news headlines into ChatGPT, ask it essentially for a stock recommendation. Is the news good or bad for a specific stock? We take that and we apply the news headlines and we ask it if it's going to increase or decrease volatility, essentially. It didn't have much of a predictive signal. There is a little bit of a predictive signal that comes out from that, but not much. Maybe going back to what we spoke about earlier in terms of classifying these artificial intelligence and machine learning algorithms, ChatGPT, what is it under the hood?
Good question. What is it?
It's just a next word prediction tool. So why would a next word prediction tool be able to help me forecast stock market volatility? So it's not quite there yet. Sure, these things are going to improve, but what we're looking at, or what we've looked at in this research, is we're more looking at the structure of the news, how that reflects what's going on in a macroeconomic scale. And I think that's why we find so much more predictive power from the methodology we've used, as opposed to just throwing it into ChatGPT.
A generic model. Or, I mean, as a side question, do you see that the future of AI and machine learning will be, there's these quite generalist platforms or models, but then highly niche ones that are specialized? And I would put what you're looking in is the latter.
Yes. Well, yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
tell me about you give me the actual answer or what it actually means, because I'm making stuff up.
Well, I think there's such a dispersion in these AI tools, right? So I'm not sure that ours is necessarily comparable to ChatGPT.
Okay, yeah.
But you're 100% correct. We see all the big investment firms doing it. They're training these large language models on their specific tasks for their specific tasks.
And their ring-fenced data, right? Like it's almost like with the walls around it.
Yeah. So they are doing it specifically to get to that end product of making these forecasts.
Right.
So we are seeing that happening, and for sure, as we see as we progress down that path, these things will get better and better in those prediction tasks, I believe.
All right, so moving on to our last segment now, on the future application of your research. Where could you see investors or other institutions like ASB applying, this approach, or are people already doing it?
We have a nice application in the paper. It comes back to this two asset idea and decreasing your exposure to this risky asset. So I think if we're confident in these volatility forecasts, we are going to see that sort of an application in portfolio construction where we're trying to reduce our exposure in risky periods. So we do that. It's called a volatility targeted portfolio, where we're trying to keep our volatility constant. With these improved volatility forecasts, there are big gains in terms of these risk-adjusted returns to these volatility-targeted portfolios. So for sure, it's got the application in there. There has been interest from industry, I believe, in this sort of area. So yeah, highly applicable to these things.
I can imagine the industry would be very interested in what you've been telling us. I mean, honestly, it's been fascinating. I just love diving into research. I want to do it more and more. But to wrap up, I guess for key takeaway for listeners, I consume way too much day-to-day news. I need to get back onto the books buzz. But does smart news following or reading, in your mind, help to build wealth?
Yes. I think the short answer is yes, you're going to be a more informed investor at that point, for sure. Are you able to digest 1.1 million full text news articles? Yeah. I think I'm happy to leave that to the computing power.
Sure, yeah. And to our final question now, one we ask all guests. So, Justin, what's something you've been reading, listening to, or watching that you can recommend to our listeners?
Textbooks and journal articles. No.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
No, well, we've been talking about the news a lot today, and we see a lot of news coming out of the Middle East at the moment. I read a very interesting book. It was titled Jerusalem, the biography. Oh. I suppose just to put all of these things in context, we see news headlines, they're often very transient.
Yeah.
So that was my first thought when that question came up.
And does that give like a history of that region? Historical context, right?
Yes, okay. Exactly.
Well, I was actually started to read a piece that's just come out recently from Morgan Stanley, but I thought there was a quote in here that I thought was appropriate for today, and it's from the late Charlie Munger, of those that know him from Berkshire Hathaway, and we've talked about volatility today, but I thought it was a good quote that stood out and kind of was an example of what we've been talking about. And to quote, "I think it's in the nature of long-term shareholding with the normal vicissitudes and worldly outcomes," bear with me here, and in markets that the long-term holder is likely to have his or her quoted value on their stocks go down to say 50%. In fact, you can argue that if you're not willing to react with the equanimity to a market price decline of 50% 2 or 3 times a century, you're not fit to be a common shareholder. And you deserve that, he says, mediocre, but I guess the lower results that you're going to get compared to those who have the temperament, who can be more philosophical about these market fluctuations. And I thought that was an interesting quote to kind of, you're helping people probably navigate what is what's the term? It's not a bug. It's just part of investing, right?
It's essentially that we're just trying to reduce the risk involved.
Yeah. Couldn't have said it better than that. So thank you, Justin, for giving up your precious time away from the textbooks and the journals and the machines that you're working so closely with to provide your insights into this very interesting world of the relationship between volatility, business news, and people's investments. So it's been a pleasure having you on the show, and I hope we can get you back soon when you've ingested 2.2 million pieces of news, maybe, or whatever. I hope you had a good time.
Yes, thank you very much for having me.
Oh, thank you for being here. And so until next time, everyone, happy investing. Keep an eye on that news, and it's bye for now. Thanks for listening to the ASB Investment Podcast. If you have any thoughts on this episode, or if there's anything you'd like us to discuss on a future show, get in touch with us at podcasts@asb.co.nz.